happy, healthy, beautiful Tuesday to you guys. Eric here, holistic health coach and actor, calling out of the Algarve in Portugal. Wishing you guys an amazing day and start to your week. And on this call, we're going to be talking about superior digestion for superior health with medicinal mushrooms. Now, we're going to be joined by Dr. Bob Rakarski, global expert, clinical nutritionist, chiropractor, kinesiologist, 33 years in clinical practice, looking at all the root causes of any illness or imbalance in his athletes, his general patients, and everyone in between. So we're talking some of the best who are hitting world records to people who are sent home to die, really looking at the full spectrum of what is going on in the body, giving them some good information and allowing their bodies to heal and come back to a state of balance. So I'm going to bring the man himself in here to Instagram. Dr. Bob, great to see you once again. We're a few minutes beyond where we were kicking off on, but we roll with the punches, so to speak. You had a busy day in the clinic. How is everything going for you on this beautiful day?
No, it is a beautiful day. It's absolutely epic. When you start asking about the clinic, I just am so inspired by people just really stepping up and taking full responsibility for their health, which, by the way, I think that's the advantage of natural medicine. It's so fascinating. Conventional medicine, people are looking for some type of passive way to get better. Whereas natural medicine, they come to realize that has its extreme limitations. Why don't I take responsibility for my health and step it up? And when we see people do that, they create a great life. So I'm excited to be part of that.
And you really are. You've made such a difference to so many people. And you can see that from people who speak of you. And over the years, I've seen people introduce you and I'm going, wow, I need to get better with introducing Dr. Bob, but starting to understand how many people you've actually been able to touch or put them on the path of healing or self-knowledge, as you mentioned. But can you just touch on what exactly is functional medicine or natural medicine? Because some people think that natural medicine is just like herbal remedies that are passed down through generations, and that can be part of it, but it's a lot deeper than just herbal remedies, right? What exactly are we dealing with functional or natural medicine, Dr. Bob?
Let's just say it could be potentially anything related to a total and complete health picture. But, my favorite definition comes from a board certified neurologist who's also board certified in nutrition, who's a New York Times bestselling author named David Perlmutter. And by the way, he got involved in functional medicine because his father had extreme Parkinson's. His father was a neurologist. He couldn't figure out, how could this happen to my dad? And then he just came to realize, wow, medicine really fell short. And what we have to understand is that conventional medicine keeps people from dying, right? If you have some circumstance that would kill you without a medicine, we want you to take it. But functional medicine actually says, what's causing this problem and how do we resolve it? And Eric, I tell people I've taught all over the world for 3+ decades. And patients generally want to know the answer to what's causing the problem. And as so many doctors have said, it's not because you have a drug deficiency or whatever. It's just because you most consistently haven't made enough healthy choices to manifest the health you deserve. So functional medicine is going to help people make those choices in every category of life to improve their health. So we do teach people to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right, etc. So that's the difference. Conventional medicine, here's a pill, let's suppress your symptoms. Functional medicine, what's causing the problem? How do we change it and make sure it never happens again?
It makes sense, really. I don't know, obviously the other model has a place for sure when it comes to certain protocols, but in the larger scheme of things, what you just mentioned makes perfect sense. So it bamboozles me that more people don't think, and I think more people are becoming more aware of that as a path. Not as a novelty path, for sure, but a path that's logical and that's effective and it's long-term and holistic. So it's good to see more people are waking up to the idea that not everything on the news or not everything in mainstream media is actually in your best interest. So you owe it to yourself to do your due diligence, to go study healthy people who have helped healthy people become healthier, which is really important. But when it comes to digestion and overall gut health, why is this particular area so critical when it comes to our overall well-being?
We've known this for a long time. I'm going to go back over 2,000 years, and Hippocrates was pretty famous for saying all disease starts in the gut. And then people said that might be an overstatement, but you know what? Not anywhere near by as much as you think. So modern research says about 90% of illness that people are seeking help with can be traced back to the gut and microbiome. So very simply, If that's responsible for 90%, we want to figure out how to optimize it. And I tell people when we start looking at the gut, there's a lot of questions that we want to ask, but the 5 major ones are: number 1, what are you eating? Number 2, how's your digestion? Number 3, what kind of bugs live in your gut? Number 4, do you have a leaky gut? And number 5, how often do you poop? And Eric, here's a sad reality of this. I have patients that are gastroenterologists, and they say this approach makes perfect sense, but we haven't been taught any of it, which is very shocking. So hopefully that's going to change in the near future. But the medical management is, let's stick a scope down your throat. Let's stick a scope up your backside. If we see bad tissue, we'll cut it out. And if we see something that doesn't work right, we'll drug it. And there's some application of that. But oh my gosh, wouldn't it be nicer if we could make food choices that actually honored our health and wellness, which too many of us just plain don't.
That's an interesting statement from those doctors that said they don't truly understand the big picture. And I would hope that more doctors actually realize that they have more work to do outside of a piece of paper. But how that connects with their practice and with the governing body, so to speak, is probably an interesting road for a doctor if they realize that they need to expand their learning and their ability to really holistically help their patients. Do you know of many doctors, Dr. Baba, who have made that kind of transition where they've had their background in traditional medicine or modern medicine, if you would, versus...
Certainly not enough, but let's talk the other end of it. There's another transition that happened. So in 2020, I listened to a podcast the other week, 115,000 medical doctors walked away from the practice of medicine. And here's what they said. They said, they're not allowing us to do what we know is right to help the patient. So think about that. And that's a very easy to understand and document progression. But this book I'm listening to by Peter Attia, he was a math major and engineering major before he got into medicine. And he was at, I believe it was Johns Hopkins, so a very prestigious residency. And he realized there was something wrong with the medication dosing schedules. They were not giving medication frequently enough to help the patient have the best opportunity to win. And so I'll share the case that he shares in his book. They had a patient that had a life-threatening infection. They were recommending an antibiotic, and they were recommending essentially 2 doses a day of the antibiotic. Peter Attia looked at what's called the pharmacokinetics. He looked at how fastly the body clears the drug. And basically, instead of 2 doses a day, it'd be better off to give 3 doses a day, especially in a life-critical section, because after 8 hours, so much of the drug was cleared that it was no longer effective. So when he was doing an overnight part of his residency, he looked at this patient that was really struggling, and he made the decision in and of himself to give this patient another dose of the medication. The patient woke up significantly better, and he found himself being just verbally assaulted by the administrators. How dare you break protocol? You ever do this again, you're done. And he walked away from medicine. He said, if I can't help people, that's not what I'm doing here. Now, interesting enough, he's had an interesting progression since then, and much more towards functional medicine, which, by the way, he calls medicine 3.0. The evolution is happening, and for the good of the world. You know, how many medical doctors do I know? Not enough. But given that 100,000+ walked away in 2020, we at least know that their heart is in the right place and they still have the capacity to do critical thinking.
For sure. And a lot of these individuals as well, I'm sure, because they don't study nutrition extensively in their education, at all. So 4 hours or so, is that 4 hours or something on nutrition? Or
a couple lectures.
Yeah.
So right. 129 of 181 US medical schools don't have any course in nutrition. And those that do have basically what you're talking about 4 hours total of lecture time.
Right. So, it's funny, isn't it? The flip on that. And we could have a conversation for hours on that. But when it comes to digestion, what's the optimum timeline for someone to digest their food? What does that look like for someone who is really checking the boxes and the digestion, Dr. Bob?
So I'm going to answer that 2 different ways. Different foods are going to require a different amount of time to digest. But generally speaking, whatever you eat, whatever comes in this end should be passing out the other end. 18 to 22 hours is considered the optimal time. And when you look at how much time does it spend in the mouth, I like the graphic because they say it should be in your mouth at least a minute. And reality is most people don't do that at all. You really need to chew your food to optimize how much nutrition you're getting from it. But when we start looking at fruit, for instance. Fruit is 90+% water, and there's something called food combining. And one of my great mentors, Dr. George Goodhart, by the way, the founder of the International College of Applied Kinesiology, the first chiropractor to work with the U.S. Olympic team, he treated royalty and some of the best athletes in the history of the planet. I'll share a fun story. I first met him, one of my heroes, in 1994. I flew to San Francisco for a conference, and I met him. I said, Dr. Goodhart, I'm such a fan of your work. Could you do me a favor? Could you just check me out and let me know what I should do differently? And Eric, he looked me up and down. He palpated the sides of my head, and he said, you know what? You seem to be doing everything right. Keep up the great work. And I thought, okay, how fascinating is that? But realistically, if you do look at someone and you know how to do basically a whole body scan, whether that could be iridology, pulse point diagnoses, different reflex, meridian analysis, you can figure out if people are doing quite well. I think if we had 100 people look at you, they'd say, this guy's doing almost everything right. And that's where we want it to be. We want to keep things going on a very good pathway. But food combining, back to this conversation. So Dr. Goodhart said, fruit, eat it 30 minutes before eating anything else. Starches, maybe as much as an hour. Protein, 2 to 3 hours. Now, what about food combining? Fruits always alone. Starches only mix with vegetables, but vegetables are good to mix with starches and or proteins. Vegetables are pretty dynamic because you can eat non-starchy vegetables with protein, you can eat it with starches, but fruit always alone. And what Dr. Goodhart said at this conference, he said, you know what, I'll be able to look at people and know where they started now, and 10 years from now, I'll look at them again, and I'll be able to tell if they've been combining their foods properly. So he felt it was that important to overall wellness, body composition, vitality, you name it.
And I can almost guarantee that the majority of people, Dr. Bob, are just shoveling in whatever, whenever. Like the people I speak to, it's almost like the idea of sectioning your foods or rationing your food, ratioing your foods is so alien. It just shows you the lack of education that people get when they're growing up. They just eat what they're given. And oftentimes that's not always a good strategy, because then, of course, people end up realizing that they're maybe celiac or gluten intolerant or dairy intolerant for years, that they've been chugging this stuff down, and their system is slowly but surely repelling these foods or these chemical ridden foods in often cases. But when you say, just because I wanted to ask about food combining later on, but when you mention about the food combining, when you segregate the foods, are we talking the starch and the vegetables would be eaten first and then give a moment or a minute or two to then chase it up with the protein? Hours. Wow.
Hours.
Okay. Well, I'm doing that wrong then.
Yeah. My typical meal, and I'll have it after this, will be a really nice big salad, all those wonderful organic grains and colorful vegetables, and then chase it up with a little protein. My dressing will be a really high quality olive oil and balsamic vinaigrette. And all those things blend nicely. Now, if I wanted to eat some fruit, we're going to have an antagonistic process. If I wanted to eat some starch, we're going to have antagonistic processes. But grains and protein, really good combination.
So you're basically eating 2 meals per meal. Is that right? So you would
have salad 2 types. Yeah. So that's still one meal that's properly combined. Now, later on, when we talk about mono meals, and that's one of my favorite strategies for digestion, if people eat one food type per meal, their digestive process for that food should be a lot more efficient. And if they begin to look at their body and how they're responding, hopefully they can figure out, okay, this is good for me or not good for me. And just last week, I didn't look at it in any great depth, but I probably, whoever's monitoring my internet, which is big money and big business and big everything else, they say, oh, this guy's interested in nutrition. Let's try to sell him different nutrition products and nutrition assessment. There's like a breathalyzer where after you eat, you use it. And if you create a certain type of gas, your body did not process that food effectively. I'm pretty excited about how people can actually figure this out. But ultimately, if people would just learn to listen to their body and do a bowel experiment. If you feel lousy all the time, then guess what? Feeling lousy from a meal doesn't make much of a difference. But if we started combining and they come to realize, wait a minute, that's a lot nicer for me. And half the people in this country, at least, have chronic digestive disturbance. That is the published fact.
Wow, because there's a lot of companies and individuals who just build their brands based on their meals and their recipes and all that stuff. And it looks good, but in the reality of the situation, it may not necessarily work for a lot of people, but it's well produced. But like I said, what looks good isn't always necessarily good. It's meant to come across as appealing, I would imagine, but not always as serving as it would let on. But when it comes to leaky gut, then, Dr. Bob, here's another challenge with digestion: leaky gut syndrome. What are some of the signs that people could identify that, okay, I may have an issue with leaky gut?
First and foremost, let's talk about what leaky gut is. I tell people that there's a tube that runs from my mouth to out my backside, and we all have that, right? If we were to swallow a penny, that penny would pass right out of our body and into the toilet. And again, hopefully 18 to 22 hours, and it never gets into our system. But if I had the most extreme of a leaky gut, that penny might get into my system. It doesn't have to be that extreme a leak, but our body, in terms of protein, we're only designed to absorb amino acids, a single amino acid, dipeptide, 2 amino acids, or a tripeptide, 3 amino acids. Any more than that is considered a foreign protein, and it could be a problem, and it create an immune response. So when you get an immune response, you get inflammation. That inflammation is going to be buffered by cortisol. So what can tend to happen is you can start to have fatigue, maybe some type of flushing, maybe some type of gut disturbance, maybe some type of headache, but generally low levels of energy. And then they've also found that leaky gut over the long run is strongly associated with autoimmune disease. So these foreign proteins, they start being attracted to different types of tissue. And when it gets delivered there, the immune system tries to take it out. And now we have a problem because they're going to take out some collateral damage to get the tissue as well. So generally speaking, you should feel better leaving the table from a meal than you did arriving. And if you didn't, then you probably made bad food choices. You didn't digest it properly. Maybe you combined it inappropriately, or just had something bad for you. But other than always feeling better leaving is what would be my goal. And that means don't eat too much. Take your time and chew it, swallow it, digest it. All those things matter. But while we're on digestion, Pavlov proved that digestion starts between the ears, right? He'd ring the bell and the dogs would begin to salivate. So the brain activity is first and foremost important. So you don't want to eat in a stress state. Saliva is a big part, so you actually want to chew it up. Hydrochloric acid is critical, and so many people have low levels of that, and we can just keep going on down the line. But reality is we've created a world where we've created maldigestion. And if we go back to basics, we can often fix it.
Nice. Just on that as well, with quality, I haven't coined the phrase, but I like to use it, which is quality is king. And as a principle for across the board, whether it comes to food, it comes to personal development, it comes to relationships, it comes to anything, always seek to expand on quality or have a level of quality that you aspire to always have and keep that. And food, for instance, the quality of food is so critical now because of the mistreatment of the soils. What would you mention or recommend to people to really focus on getting more organic or grass-fed foods as opposed to the cheaper, which is more costly in the run, the cheaper, regular, commercially raised produce that's so common on a lot of shelves around the globe?
You need to have some level of awareness. And one of the ways to create awareness, Michael Pollan's book In Defense of Food, he said something strange started happening in the 70s. Food started flying off the shelf of the grocery stores and being replaced by food-like items. It looked like food, it smelled like food, it might have even tasted like food, but it certainly wasn't food. And we've heard the term junk food. And a couple of weeks ago, I was one of the main speakers at a conference where Judy Mikovits was also a main speaker. She's an absolute sage of wisdom. And she said some things that were so powerful about the evolution of how things are going in this world. But she said, they call it junk food, but she says that's not accurate at all. There's junk and there's food. It's junk if it's food. And I thought that was really powerful. But another thing that she said was she teaches people don't count calories, count chemicals. How many chemicals are in these wonderful organic plants? And here's the sad reality, still some, because plants are air purifiers. And as they purify the air, they pull some of the toxins out of the air. Animals are bioconcentrators. So they live on lower level plants and animals, and they concentrate the nutrients. That's a good thing, but they also concentrate the toxins. So we have a long road ahead of us to get these chemicals out of the environment, to realize that junk food is not an accurate statement. It's either junk or it's food. And most people are eating junk, and we should switch them to food. So, what you're talking about, good organic plants grown in nutrient-dense soil, farm-raised animals, free-range animals, no antibiotics, no hormones. We're coming to realize that people that do this, they're going to live better, they're going to live longer. People that don't, we only need to look and see what's happening in the environment. And it's not good.
No, it really isn't. And it takes its toll, it builds up and it builds up. And if you're not getting good quality fuel, like I always say to clients and friends, you don't put low grade fuel in a high octane performance machine and expect it to run around the track and do all those great things and accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish in life. You're not going to do it on trash. You're essentially going to be eating yourself to death at some point, because whatever nutrients we don't get in, the body extracts a lot from the joints and literally eats itself alive, which I thought was fascinating, how much of a survival mechanism the body actually has, that it will extract nutrients from the tissues and essentially break you down. So we're creating solutions to build you up, not break you down. The natural growth, the aging process will come. It'll come to all of us, but it won't come to all of us equally. It will depend on how we live our lives, the quality of our lives, the quality of our fuel, the quality of our activity levels, a number of different things. But for sure, you were talking about clearing out toxins out of the air and out of the soils. Medicinal mushrooms are so powerful for clearing toxins, not only in humans, but also in the environment as well. And I think it's what led us on to share this on a global scale. Full disclosure for us, we're ambassadors for a company who share organic medicinal mushrooms, flagship being Reishi, the king of all medicinal mushrooms, but they're super, super powerful for overall health, but also for digestion. So what are we looking at here, Dr. Bob, when it comes to Reishi, when it comes to Cordyceps, when it comes to lion's mane? What do these medicinal mushrooms have to offer to help protect our digestive system, but also to enhance the function of it?
Well, let's start at the very beginning, right? If we were to start with the brain, and the brain is the starting point of digestion, it's going to put the brain in a much more relaxed state, which basically allows for rest, digest, procreate. That's what they're going to call the parasympathetic nervous system. When you start looking at saliva, here's a fascinating fact, is that the enzyme alpha amylase in saliva works under a very narrow range of pH. And most people's pH is way off in terms of being way too acid. So these mushrooms will also help to balance the acid alkaline, which will increase all the efficiency of enzymes, not just those in the mild alpha amylase. The 25 or 35,000 enzymes that are in our body all get more efficient. Then as we start getting to the stomach and hydrochloric acid, it's actually known that the mushrooms can actually kill things that are bad for the gut, like something called Helicobacter pylori that is associated with gastric ulcers. It also increases the health and the efficiency of the cells that make hydrochloric acid, and it also helps the gut to make mucus, which protects it. So I tell people, we're so fascinating that if I took a drop of my hydrochloric acid, which my stomach has now, and I put it on my computer laptop, it'll eat a hole in it. So why doesn't it eat a hole in my stomach? Because my stomach has protective mechanisms. So again, when we take these mushrooms, it enhances the parietal cells, it enhances the gut mucus synthesis. Then we go right on down the line. It's great for the liver, it's great for the gallbladder, it's great for the pancreas, not just the digestive portion of the pancreas, but the insulin and endocrine portion. It's great for the small intestine. It's great for the microbiome. It's great for regularity. You start looking at all these things and you come to realize, okay, from top to bottom, it has value. And if we put that in our bodies consistently, it'd be a whole lot better for it. So top to bottom, digestive support, and even more than that.
I love it. I see a number of people actually who start on Reishi and they're messaging back and going, I'm very regular and I have lost a number of kilos over a pretty short period of time. And I always say to people, don't worry, that's your system just adapting to getting nutrition perfection in your system. That's okay. Let it do its thing. I know you've had experiences with that over the years as well, Dr. Bob, of the system being flushed. What is really going on there, to not paint too graphic a picture, but what is actually going on with the whole system?
That's one of the key pathways of elimination, toxin elimination. And it's not the only one. We've got the liver, the kidneys, the bowel, the lymphatic, the skin, the lungs, all those things matter. But you'd be surprised at how many people are either too dehydrated to have regular bowel flow, or the things that would normally produce that response, like a good functioning of the autonomic nervous system, good liver, good gallbladder. These pave the way for things to get out of the way nicely. And if you look at a little baby, they model what should happen with our digestion. They eat, they poop, they eat, they poop, they eat, they poop. And because it's inconvenient, we put the brakes on that reflex. And we often do it to our detriment. And so at bare minimum, people ought to be having a good bowel movement at least once a day, preferably 2 or 3 times a day. And I just happened to be reading something in the chat where this individual, I think, has just started taking our products. He says, I'm now pooping 3 times a day and I haven't been that regular in years. If people understand that this is absolutely critical to health, it would not be a taboo topic anymore. People would just realize, okay, elimination is perfectly normal and just fit it into their schedule. If you have to go to the bathroom, find a way to go. Just that simple.
I love it. You mentioned about the gallbladder earlier. I had a number of people I've spoke to recently who've had their gallbladder removed. And you were sharing with me recently about, I think it was protease, of what the protocol is for someone who's had their gallbladder removed and has had issues breaking down the fats. How would medicinal mushrooms help someone who has had a gallbladder removed, and what kind of protocols would you recommend for someone who's gone through that process?
There's a lot of enzymes within the medicinal mushrooms themselves, and they'll increase the efficiency of all of our enzymes. And keep in mind that the gallbladder is just an extension of the liver. It stores and concentrates bile. And so we want to keep the liver healthy, and the medicinal mushrooms do that really effectively as well. But when someone has their gallbladder out, and when we look, if you were to go and type up what are the 4 F's, or we might even call them the 5 F's of gallbladder, they're not very flattering, but here they are. The fat, 40, fertile, flatulent female is the one that's most likely to have the gallbladder out. So why fat? That increases estrogen. Why 40? The woman's had estrogen for a longer period of time. Why fertile? Because that means she has a fair amount of estrogens. Flatulent, that's because she's not digesting her fat. And female, because she has more estrogens. But Eric, now there's this term called xenoestrogens, foreign estrogens, and even metalloestrogens. And there was a researcher in the 1990s, and it's gotten much worse than that. He says, we're swimming in a sea of estrogens. And I believe it's these estrogens that are depleting the nutrient reserves of the body and setting up even young men for serious gallbladder problems. And the gastroenterologist seems to be their first, if it's not their first attempt, it's early on that someone has a gallbladder problem, they remove their gallbladder. For instance, I can think of a recent conversation. A patient came in and they said, yeah, they want to remove my gallbladder. And I said, why? They said, well, it's only operating at about 30% function. And then I asked the question, after they remove it, what will the function be? And they looked at me confused. And I said, that's not a trick question. If you have a gallbladder that's not healthy and it's working at 30%, what happens if you have no gallbladder? I guess it'd be 0%. Why don't we try to make your gallbladder healthier? There's an interesting title of a book. I read it many years ago. It's called Are You Stoned? And it was talking about gallstones. And there's plenty of people that have them. And people can do a gallbladder flush, which can be as simple as olive oil and lemon juice at night. Now, they should probably make sure their gallbladder's calm because they might have a gallbladder attack if they don't do that. I've done it myself. I think I did my first gallbladder flush over 30 years ago. And I was pretty surprised. I passed this green stuff out in the toilet. I've had people bring in what they passed. And I even had a guy on a liver transplant list that we put him on gallbladder flushes, and he passed out a stone almost the size of a golf ball. And he said, Bob, all my liver problems turned around, and he was able to get off the transplant list. Now, for qualification, I shared that video. I've got that video on my YouTube channel. And I shared it in Los Angeles, and there was a medical doctor, and he said, look, I like you. I like what you said so far, but he says, I'm calling BS. He says, there's no way that you can fit a stone that big through a duct as the diameter of my pinky, right? They don't match. My brain sometimes works faster than it should, and my mouth doesn't have a good governor. So in this seminar with hundreds of doctors there, after he said, there's no way a stone this big will fit through a duct that big, I asked the question, I said, how big is a baby? And the whole audience just started cracking up. And I didn't want to belittle this guy, but I wanted to make the point that human tissue has pliability. It can stretch. And I've seen enough people after a gallbladder flush bring in stuff that wouldn't fit through a normal sized duct. And some of these people even have ultrasounds before and after showing that their stone is gone. Wow. Can this work? Oh, it absolutely can. And so we definitely want to, if it's called for, do that.
I have a good friend and client actually who's had an issue with gallbladder removal and since had an issue where he was hospitalized as well, and just mentioned that he had potentially another stone that was not taken out when they removed the gallbladder. or dealt with, said he's waiting on liver function report to proceed with doing whatever he's doing. Any advice there for him, Dr. Bob? Because I know it's a lot of discomfort for him.
Let's start working on dissolving it. Artichoke leaf extract tends to be good. A low-fat diet can be good. Inositol and choline can help. The amino acid taurine can help. When I hear stories like that, it really frustrates me. While they're in there, if there's issues, correct them all at the same time. And with imaging, they can get so good. And by the way, it's been a long time since I studied, but part of my education was actually in operating rooms. And we're talking that both in the 90s and then in the mid 2000s. And I spent many hundreds of hours in operating rooms. And even in the 90s, they would bring in radiographic imaging to make sure they were in the right spot, that there weren't problems there. And even surgical materials, by the way, they have something that will show up on x-ray, because if they leave a gauze in a body, they do a nice count before surgery. Hey, we've got 50 gauze patches. And when they're done, they say, okay, we account for all 50. If they don't, where are we missing? And they'll pull out the x-ray machine and say, hey, did we leave that in the body? And they'll often do that right before they close the body up, because they want to make sure, okay, we're not missing anything. It sounds like someone didn't really exercise the level of diligence that they should have there. But let's just put the person on good gallbladder protocol. Even if they don't have a gallbladder, they can do a gallbladder flush. We can thin the bile, we can flush it out. The common bile duct is still intact. It's just the gallbladder's not there anymore.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know that will be a big help for my friend. When it comes to the alkaline-rich benefits of medicinal mushrooms like reishi, can they help with any acid or negative acid response in our gut and in our digestive process?
They certainly can. But part of what I want to say about that is that there's a lot of misinformation, right? That's a popular buzz term these days about acid alkaline. And it's very fascinating that as the body becomes progressively toxic, the energy efficiency drops down, including the cells that make acid. And acid reflux is, believe it or not, usually not having enough stomach acid, because when there's enough stomach acid, the muscle, what's called the lower esophageal sphincter, keeps the acid within the stomach. But someone might say, okay, if I don't have enough stomach acid, why would I want to alkalize? And reality is, as the body becomes progressively acid, part of what it does is it depletes chloride. It actually passes out in the urine, and the body might not even have the sufficient substrate to make hydrochloric acid. But when we increase the energy efficiency of the parietal cells, of the mitochondria that make 94.4% of human energy, then we can more efficiently make acid. Where this comes into play more is, for instance, our medicinal mushroom infused coffee, because there's a bunch of people that can't drink coffee because their stomach doesn't handle the acid well. So as we alkalize that, they handle it better. And there's plenty of people that'll tell you that coffee in and of itself has profound health benefits. Reishi infused coffee, even more benefits.
I'm sure over the 11 years you've been sharing the reishi infused coffee and tea, you've had a string of people who may have had issues with acid and are feeling a whole lot better. Would I be right, Dr. Bob?
You know, almost every single person. Think about people that had problems with their gut and acid reflux and couldn't drink coffee. I tell people that I've only had one person after a week of spores, because we lay into that conversation before we started filming. Only one person after that week still didn't tolerate the coffee effectively. I think they should have done it longer. They just gave up and said, I guess coffee's not for me. But that means, who knows, maybe 20 people a year over 11 years. That's 220 people. 219 of them after a week of spores could easily handle their coffee. So,
wow,
pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that there's a lesson in that as well. For things to get better, they often have to get worse. Or it certainly appear that it's worse, but it is the process of growth and getting through a difficult time for you to flourish and get on with things. But just in regards to, I know we'll wrap up now in a moment, just in regards to the bugs in our gut, how does reishi help with the ratio then of good to bad bugs in our gut?
It's pretty fascinating that when people take an antibiotic, where the word anti literally means against, bios, life, they have a weird effect where it tends to kill off the healthy organisms and the bad ones proliferate. God's pharmacy has the opposite plan. Somehow there's the combination of botanicals in there, and there's at least 79 unique molecules in reishi that are antimicrobial, and they actually kill off the bad while preserving and even feeding the good. In the medical model where you think, okay, one molecule does everything, what if we use something that had 430 unique molecules, 79 of which were antimicrobial, and then all of the fabulous 50 nutrients? And what happens? Here's what we can tell you. The gut gets better with consistent reishi, almost irregardless of the circumstance. Great for digestion, great for leaky gut, great for elimination, great to prevent cancer. There's no downside to it.
I love it. And really, for anyone who wants to give this a go, give it at least 30 minimum days, if not 60 and beyond, before you can say this is for me or not, because things take time, especially the most important things. They have a gestation, pardon the pun, or a digestion phase for things to work in our favor. So be patient. Don't expect things overnight. People have seen literally overnight, or within one sip, one cup, that is, noticed benefits and differences, but everyone is different. You have your own healing period, so allow yourself to go through that. But just wrapping up then, my last question, Dr. Bob, when it comes to our expansive range of medicinal mushrooms with Cordyceps, lion's mane as well, any particular benefits for digestion with those two? Obviously, we mentioned a lot about reishi, but now we have Cordyceps in our red tea. We have the newest edition, which has got body of mushroom, it's got the Cordyceps, and it's got lion's mane in one black coffee, which is absolutely awesome. Any particular benefits for digestion in those additional two?
Oh, sure. And so first and foremost, I tell people the predominant enemy of the digestive tract is actually stress. So by buffering the stress, that'll make a big difference there. And these are quite good at that. Then we start looking at acid-alkaline imbalance, which is universal. In the tens of thousands of people that I've assessed acid alkaline, no one has perfect pH. And here's what we know. The healthiest people have the best pH. The sickest people have the worst. And so as we balance the pH, every enzyme, every hormone, including digestive enzymes, and we might even say metabolic regulating hormones like thyroid hormone, insulin, they work more effectively. So everything gets better with the blend of those. Now, there's a reason we focus on reishi. It is the king of herbs, which means it has no equal. And we find that also with the digestive tract, but we can add some synergistic partners. And the data that's emerged over the lifetime of study of these shows Cordyceps is a number 2. Lion's mane, I don't know where it would fit into the hierarchy of mushrooms, but it's the number 3 most consumed medicinal mushroom on the planet. So a lot of people are experiencing benefit. I went to PubMed and there's about 300 studies on that, a couple thousand on Cordyceps, several thousand on reishi. I think in time it's going to show that, you know what, whatever ails you, this combination seems to be moving the body in a better direction. And by the way, that's the term adaptogens. And these are powerful adaptogens in that respect.
A beautiful triple threat in defense of you. And I don't think there's better investments than the investment in you guys. So double down on your investment. You are the best investment you're ever going to make. Don't see this as an expense. See it as a gateway to a better you. Period. End of story. I see a message here coming in here on Instagram from a lady. Can you take reishi with antibiotics?
Absolutely, you can. Now, what I tell people is, again, the antibiotics are to kill off the good microbes, and reishi is not going to stop it from killing the good microbes. And then people often get overgrowth of yeast and things like that. So there's a microorganism called Saccharomyces boulardii that can prevent some of the challenges related to the antibiotic really disrupting the microbiome. And then the reishi probably help the body resolve the infection faster and then serves as a prebiotic for the good bugs that are left. So absolutely you can.
Beautiful. And of course, get in a good probiotic after your antibiotics as well, because when I was first taking antibiotics as a kid, I was never told about probiotics after. But of course, that combined with reishi would be a great combo for healing you up. You also mentioned about colostrum as well being great to help seal the gut, right, Dr. Bob? That would be something else.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the best things out there for passive immunity and to seal the gut. And what I tell people is that all babies are born with a leaky gut. And there's reason for that. When they consume mother's milk, there's huge immunoglobulins that have to be able to cross across that intestinal barrier to help protect the baby. But as the baby grows out of that, they want to seal and heal the gut. And colostrum is very good to accelerate that process.
Beautiful. Dr. Bob, I'm going to let you get on with your day. I know we ran over a little bit, but we adapted, we improvised, we adapted, we overcame, as the Marines would say. Dr. Bob, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise again, knocking it out of the park. Thank you guys for joining us. Same back to you, Janelle, Michael, Rose, Lee. Great to see you guys here. Hannah, Jim, Rose. I mentioned Rose. Have an amazing day, guys. We will be back on Saturday for our business conversation, all things entrepreneurship. We love these products. We share these products. And in a world that has a digital franchise attached to it, why not get paid to refer things that you love? That's what we will be sharing on this conversation on Saturday. So, Dr. Bob, I'll hand it over to you just to wrap up the call. Thank you once again for sharing your time, your wisdom, and expertise with us, and love for helping people to get to where they really want to go. So I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Bob. Thanks you.
All right. Thank you for another great conversation. I like to wrap up with 4 questions. I learned them from Jim Rohn over 30 years ago, and they're as valid today. So the first question is why? Why'd you take the time to join us today? There's so many other things you could do. Your second question is the answer to the first. Why not? The world is waking up to the realization that we need to be proactive about our health. 90% of what people struggle with is in somehow traceable back to their gut. So we want to make good food choices and enhance our digestion. Next question is why not you? Someone's going to take some of this information, they're going to combine their foods properly, they're going to take more time to eat, they're going to use some of these powerful medicinal mushrooms and get better for it. And here's the final question, why not now? So the longer you wait to act on information, the least likely you are to act on it. So if someone sent you to this Zoom or live or Instagram or Facebook or wherever you're seeing it or replay, reach back to them and say, you know what, I'm ready to take my game and my health to the next level. What do I need to do? Right? And we're happy to give you guidance on that. So with that said, another beautiful day, another beautiful conversation. In your part of the world, Eric, good night and God bless. In this part of the world, we got plenty of day ahead. So good afternoon and God bless. And hope to see you later in the week on our business conversation.